Good morning, everyone. This is the second panel. Who are we building for? The first panel, and that was an awesome panel. Thank you very much. I felt focused on the supply side. This is more or less on the demand side. So who are we building for? My name is Shawn Brown. I'm the moderator. A bit about me. I'm the managing director of Atlantic Real Estate Advisory Services, which is a property valuation appraisal firm, as well as I provide consultation on various real estate matters. I'm also a counselor for the City of Hamilton, and I'm going to introduce our panel. First, we have Mr. Paul Martin, who's the CEO, General Manager of the Bermuda Housing Corporation. Paul has a background in strategic planning and community development, and he oversees initiatives aimed at improving affordable housing access across Bermuda. Next, we have Ms. Cecilia Edwards, who's a real estate broker. In 2010, she founded Bermuda Longtail Real Estate Limited, which is a family-owned and operated company. She wears several hats. She is the Chamber of Commerce Real Estate Division Chair, Chamber of Commerce Executive Board Member, and Real Estate Advisory Board Member. Next, we have Mr. Andrew Dias, who is the Chief Executive Officer of, one second, sorry, Andrew.
BLMC.
Yeah. Of the former Bermuda
Wedco and former
BLDC, who's responsible for the land management of that Quango that operates from Southside to Dockyard. Next, we have Ms. Denise Carey, who is the Executive Director of Home. Home's mission is to end homelessness in Bermuda. Denise is responsible for delivering Home's strategic priorities, which is helping homeless individuals and families receive shelter, health, and social services. Next, we have Ms. Mercedes Pringle-DeSilva, who's the Executive Director of Age Concern Bermuda, the island's leading nonprofit advocating for the rights of adults aged 50 and above. And we have Ms. Heather Pinnock, who needs no introduction, and we'll start the panel. So what are we trying to achieve with this panel? There's going to be a few things to clarify affordability in the Bermuda context. We hear that word thrown out a lot, but is there a set definition of affordability? So hopefully we could achieve this. Diagnose supply and demand gaps, explore practical development tools and policy levers, produce a concise set of actionable takeaways, because it's one thing to talk, but it's another thing to start action, as Noriko stated earlier, and foster cross-sector alignment, because in many instances we tend to operate in silos as opposed to work collaboratively. So in short, the panel hopes to move the conversation from broad aspirations to a concrete roadmap. So I will start with Mr. Paul Martin. What are the most urgent housing needs, and how is the BAC addressing them? So this could be from price points to type of demand that you see.
Okay. I guess that's a wide open question.
Yep.
For us, affordable actually is low cost affordable housing, because one person said affordable is whatever somebody can afford. So we, with housing, we'll look at towards the low cost aspect of affordable housing and how we can work with our citizens to help them find a good affordable place to live. Who needs it? Currently right now on our list, and I just put some stats down this morning, we have a list of 375 applicants, which is 375 families, which could be from individuals to a family that may have 4 or 5 children. Of that, we have 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, 58 for 3 bedrooms, 149 on 2 bedrooms, and 168 on 1 bedrooms. So it sort of tells you there's a wide range there of what the needs are for our residents. And we have a total units available of 704 units within our realm. Some of those are that are also we're working on right now. So they're not all occupied. There are buildings that have been derelict for a number of years, and we started a program of refreshing those and getting those in there. So we have working on right now, there's 12 units of Harmony. There's, I get those numbers, so there's 12 units Harmonies we're working on. We have 5 units down in St. George's, 4 in Middletown, and another 12 at the Point of St. David's. So we're working on those units right now to come within the next year and a half. All those should be online. But basically, we know that Home also has a number of families that they've been dealing with also. So to those that really need housing are the ones within our realm, those for the low-cost housing.
Okay, thank you, Paul. A lot of data right there. So this question's for Denise. Based on your experience at Home, what does affordable housing look like for Bermuda's most vulnerable residents?
Affordable housing is not a point in time. It's a process. Affordable housing means accountability and it means sustainability. Accountability meaning long-term political will backed up with financial resources in order for us to identify and build, matched with resources from our community and persons that are experiencing homelessness. That means that we are not pouring money in and not getting anything back. That means that we make a commitment to hire persons who are experiencing homelessness or threatened with homelessness so that they are developing skills, so that over the next couple of years, they are learning through trades, that they are getting paid for the work that they're doing, that they are learning to pay rent, that they are learning to take care of these properties, so that when we are 10 years from now and we have moved everybody in, that people can stay in. And that means that we will be relying less on incarceration, funds into financial assistance, and we will be able to have a community where everybody is in and contributing.
Okay, so it's pretty all-encompassing.
Absolutely.
It's, physical. Okay, good. So this next question is for Ms. Edwards. What trends and challenges are you seeing in the private housing and rental market?
Okay, so thank you for the question. Basically, the trends and challenges that that we are currently seeing in the real estate industry is we are in a complete unsustainable housing economy right now. It's literally unprecedented. You know, I remember starting real estate in 1991, and people did not have, you know, the challenges and struggles that they are having today with we welcome IB, International Business, with open arms, but what that's done to Bermuda is, you know, I'm sure many of you are aware, are for one property of a 1 or a 2-bedroom or even a 3-bedroom, finding multiple offers, people bidding significantly higher than listed prices, or tenants would say they'll be responsible for A, B, and C. And what that is doing to our local Bermudian fabric is, you know, some of which are very highly educated, which are, you know, can be single parents with children or seniors, it's moving them out of what used to be a somewhat affordable platform for them and resource. You know, there's a lot of tears out there sometimes sitting with these families, some families who have broken up in divorce because of the stresses that they're going through. And I think it's something that I also feel that education is a huge thing that can be presented to the schools, whether it be the seniors in high school or college individuals, to educate our community, our local fabric, what it means to keep a house, as Denise alluded to, what it means to look at the conditions of a lease agreement. I think that all of these things can be a further conversation. And, but at the moment, as Mariko intimated in the very beginning, it is unsustainable, and we need accurate data to get really to the crux of, you know, what's going on and who's truly being affected by this. And I know the topic that we're discussing is who are we building for, but I think it's also important to also discuss who built Bermuda and what did that mean to the people that built this country, some on, you know, very, I want to say, on the backs of people who built. So I do hope that while we're improving buildings and facilities, that we're going to be honoring these individuals. You know, again, the history element, the awareness element, the educational element, I feel needs to be part of the conversation and fabric before we really, truly realize who we are building for.
Thank you, Cessa. You alluded to something in terms of data, which sort of brings us to the next segment of this panel. So I'll lead a question to Andrew. How better land management and clearer data can meet Bermuda's future development needs, particularly in your role?
Sure. I think it's imperative. I guess I would start off by saying we should all stop using the word affordable. It's either subsidized housing or it's not subsidized housing. And because everybody, I may make exactly the same money, have the exact same house as everyone else, but I have 3 children. You have none. Your disposable income is probably different from mine. And I think that using the word affordable has so many different variables to it that we really, if we're going to crack this housing issue, we need to have separate sections within it. The other piece of it is, I think that we have seen a serious decline in private, and that's not new, I mean, everyone knows it, that the private sector availability has gone down for various reasons, whether it be Airbnb, whether it be other things around, and the reliance on government to provide government-sustained housing has increased, and we're trying to catch up and do the rest of it. So basically, all of that is subsidized. In one shape or form, it is entirely subsidized. And so the need for data, I think, is very, very important. I think that if, you know, we're going to have a long-term government housing responsibility, that we should know who's going in there, why they're going in there, and we should have a plan also so that if it is where people are being subsidized, that they are not subsidized for 25 years or 30 years, that there is a proper process that goes through it, and it's going to be difficult. It is extremely difficult what we're actually talking about, because there are people in government housing that desperately require it. There are people that are not in government housing that probably need it even more than some of them that are there, because the ones that are there in some cases have a boat and a jet ski and this, and they take 4 trips a year. Those are realities of what goes on. So I think this is a very, very difficult topic, and I do agree with the first panel that we're going to have to get uncomfortable.
Right. Thank you for that, Andrew. Again, the theme that keeps coming up when I'm finding is data. So again, to you, Cecilia, how has the lack of access to real-time data impacted property transactions and development opportunities, in your opinion?
So I remember when appraisers and real estate agents, you know, we would grumble and say, oh, the LTRO, they're 30 days backlogged or 60 days backlogged or 90 days. Like currently it is 2 years backlogged. The resources need to be increased, in my opinion, and you know, obviously they're doing the best that they can under the constraints that they have, but we're even finding circumstances where information that has been input are inaccurate in some cases, and if developers are supposed to, meet profit expectations, and sellers and agents are supposed to list properties at correct prices, we need to have up-to-date and current information because it skews everything. There are appraisers and brokers and agents that are scrambling, calling each other saying, what did that sell for a year ago? What did the, So the LTRO, the Land Title Registration Office, they need to have the funds to ensure that the information that are being presented to the whole of Bermuda is accurate because, again, who are we building for? We won't be able to do this properly without having current and accurate data, and that takes resources and that takes money.
Correct, and I can attest to this as an appraiser.
I thought you could.
But no, it's very crucial because, again, it helps with decision-making and having accurate data, and real estate is a very capital-intensive entity, so it's best to have accurate data to make informed decisions. So thank you for that. So I'll open up the next question to the panel. If you wish to answer, you can. How can we improve data collection to drive more informed and fair housing decisions?
The jurisdictions that have had the greatest success around the world with ending homelessness are those who've been able to clearly define all of the subsections and to focus, yes, on building, but then also to focus on the people. We are a small community. We need one version of the truth. If Bermuda Housing has one stat and then HOME has another stat, what are we working towards? We should have one system where persons can, no matter what organization you go to, that is the correct organization to go to because we are all pouring into the same system. We need to have legal definitions so that we're not just talking about homelessness, but we know who we are talking about. That we're talking about rough sleepers, or persons who are living in emergency housing, or persons who are living in cars, or seniors, or 18-year-olds who are aging out, or persons coming out of Department of Corrections, or living in our hospital. We need to know who our hidden homeless are, who's living in derelict buildings, who's being put out through the courts, who is homeless due to immigration. In the absence of identifying what these categories are, we're going to continue to spin our wheels. So data should be where we start. How many homes do we have in Bermuda? Where is the property portal so that we have a clear inventory? And at the same time, we need to identify who the people are that need them and what sorts of housing that they need.
So in essence, identification is key in terms of how we improve. Anybody else that wants to provide insight in terms of how we can improve data collection?
I do want to piggyback on Denise in that, what it sounds like she's calling for is a housing strategy, and we're here in 2025. Maybe we should aim for a 2030, housing strategy. The information, again, that data word is just crucial. I know the Chamber's been working on that, for so long, and we continue to advocate for appropriate data, because without having that information, how do we know who we're building for? How do we know that we're accommodating our seniors, our single parents with children, our international business community? We need, if we want to bring, Mark Twain has this, help me out, something about you can go to heaven, but I'd rather stay in Bermuda. Yeah. But people are leaving Bermuda. So we really need to have a housing strategy implemented, and the resources and the money and the infrastructure is important before we can take any next step, in my opinion.
Well, I just jump in and do the opposite. Sorry, my good friend, because I do agree with some of the previous panel that we know we have a situation now where there are people that require a home. We cannot wait until 2030 to supply them their units. And so we have to, and I'll use Mr. Thomas's, agree on a number to start with, because those are the ones that we're going to get. But I agree that the long term is the reason, unless we want to be back in this cycle 20 years from now, we need to have centralized data so that we can take out these peaks and valleys over long periods of time that stop, the development of housing, and it starts, it stops, and then we build 100 homes, and then we stop for various different reasons. You take out all those edges, but I do think we need to have a number, and I think we need to get on with it now.
Okay, cool. The next question is directed to Mercedes, who's been quiet this whole time. What are the unique housing and care needs of Bermuda's aging population, and how can our development approach better accommodate them?
So as most of you know, our population is aging dramatically. I think the estimates currently stand that in 2039, there will be 1 in 4 individuals older than 65 and older. And it's not surprising that that means that the demand for housing that is affordable but also supportive is increasing. And that's not just going to be in regular everyday residential housing. That's going to be in the general infrastructures that we create in the city of Hamilton, everywhere. We have to be more cognizant that the current population will not be the same. And so we have to build for what is already here, really, and what is to come. So in my opinion, we need to look at trying to figure out how to, it's pretty much centralizing our data. I don't want to go back to that. But it's really important for us to figure out what the current need is in terms of the amount of care and what types of care this island is going to need. We see it in our hospitals now where we have overpopulation or bed blocking, in terms of what we need in the hospital is obviously a re-evaluation of what's being utilized, and that goes across the board. So we need to really figure out how to come up with this centralized or a plan that is across the board for older adult long-term care so that we can establish, what direction we want to go in. It's going to require a lot of collaborative effort from our government, from our nonprofits, from our general private sector, because right now we don't have a clear picture, and that is because we don't have the data to reflect what the current needs of our older adult population is. We don't know who is living independently, who is going to need long-term care. It is a very big spectrum of housing needs, and we just don't have the data to back up anything at this point. I feel like it's kind of difficult to stay where the care needs are going to be.
I'll just, one point of that is, a lot of our housing is generational, so people have been in the housing for a long time. So you've probably seen recently in our main 3 areas where we have a lot of housing, there's been talk about and helping with the infrastructure there. Some of that infrastructure is actually helping the seniors that are in these homes actually move about within the area, move about within their own unit. And also we have apartment buildings up there, putting elevators in the apartment buildings, putting ramps on the street so people can have wheelchairs and that sort of thing. So it's not, we have them housed, but how long can they actually be comfortably in those units, and what can we do to help sustain that? We also have, on occasions where a couple who live in a 2-bedroom unit because they used to have children, the children moved out, one of the people have passed away, and then the individual also has an onset of dementia. What do we do? Do we then say, no, we can't have them house them in the housing because they're supposed to have one room, they have 2 bedrooms? Do we say, no, they're allowed to have a helper come in and use that apartment and then they can maintain them within that house? Or do we say, no, you have to go somewhere else to some other care facility? So these are some of the questions of how do we deal with aging seniors and in our own developments, and what liability do we have on doing that?
Okay, thank you very much. This question is directed to Paul and Andrew, since you guys deal with a lot of government subsidized housing. What role should means testing play in the allocation of government-supported housing, and do you see any challenges with means testing?
No, I would agree that it does need to occur. If I look at our data, we have a total of 89 residential units. They're 100% occupied. We've had certain families there for 25 years. And it, under the legislation for it, I think that our legislation is completely different from, say, a housing corporation. If it is going to be government housing, I think that any entity that is dealing with government or subsidized housing should have the same legislation. So in other words, if the person is looking to do it, they should have a means test. As their situations change, then you should be able to adjust it accordingly. And what I mean is, you know, your children move out, you may still have the same residual income, so you could afford to either live somewhere else because you don't have those same responsibilities. And I think it needs to be reviewed on an ongoing basis, not just through the Landlord-Tenant Act.
I'll just add on that. We actually, it's a very good point, and it has to have some means testing, because we do have families, as I said before, been in units for decades. They may have their children, adult children living there, so they have 4 incomes in this subsidized housing unit. So beginning in January, we actually started looking at getting all the income levels that we have for every working adult in the units. So we're going through that data now. But the problem is, if they can go, they should not be in our unit, and they should be because they can afford a lot more. Where do they go? There's not a lot out there in the private sector. So it gets back to our thing about data. So yeah, there are probably people living in affordable housing units that have a very high income. I don't know what that percentage is. We're just getting to those numbers now. But it is. But I don't believe it's a huge number. But where do we put those people in the public, in the private sector? We don't have housing for them anyway. They can't go from paying $2,000 a month to paying $6,000 a month. It's, you know, a bit more for them to handle. So.
Thank you very much. The next question is to Heather, who's been quiet down there, but you did an awesome presentation speech previously. What lessons from the Caribbean region could Bermuda consider to support resilient and inclusive development from your experience?
Okay, so I've actually been involved in a couple of housing projects. One I'll highlight is it's called the Green Affordable Housing Project in St. Lucia. And what they're doing is they are seeking global climate financing to support affordable, low-income housing, because there's a recognition that housing is going to generate certain costs, certain energy usage, a certain amount of water usage, and therefore putting in those conservation and efficiency and alternate sources of supporting how natural resources are used by these houses is a critical part. But that means additional costs to build them. So the project has been looking at seeking funding globally, I think particularly targeting climate funds, so that gets written into affordable housing projects, to be sure that those are some of the things that are a core part of building out affordable housing, especially when it's at a large scale, so you're getting a lot of numbers. It helps to bring down the cost of some of those elements. And so making it more a common, the elements of sustainability in the housing, a common, core part of doing large-scale housing projects.
Okay.
Can I just jump in here and say that I totally agree with that, and it also goes into what I guess some of what we have to do as far as government housing, because the landlord, if you look at the Landlord-Tenant Act and different things, if we're going to be required or expected to have affordable, or I don't want to use that, to say subsidized housing, then there should be benefits that are provided either through customs tariffs, breaks, or other things in order to remain in that area of being subsidized. You know, we have a situation, I think, going forward where if that's the entity that's going to do it, but in the private sector, and I'm going to flip it a little bit, and I'm sure some of the people here may appreciate it, is that it costs the same to build, no matter who you're building for, based on our current planning regulations. And yet, we have a system in place with rent control and other things where certain individuals, because they live in a certain area, are able to get a return on investment on their property at this rate, but yet the vast majority of people that we have encouraged over the last probably 50 or plus years to become a homeowner that have an apartment actually are only allowed to make this much of a return. So I think this also needs to somehow be put into the fold as well.
I agree 110%. No, seriously, if I could just say a couple minutes, as a valuer, it's interesting to see in certain areas due to rent control, people are only allowed to rent at a certain level, but yet you have the exact same property in terms of dimensions, and you could even state condition that they're allowed to charge whatever they want. And if you look at the particular areas that are under control, they're not the best areas per se, if I can just be blunt. So it's a very interesting dynamic that I don't think publicly enough people have stated for the decision makers to really reconsider who is this benefiting and who is it harming. I do see the benefit, but we have to look at both sides of the coin.
Yeah, the cost of cabinets are the same for each person that's renovating that kitchen.
Yeah. All right. So just time is running short. Just question. But thank you very much, everyone. Apologies. You know, it was a very in-depth discussion. It's definitely we need to have more of these types of discussions, but I'll just open it up to the audience if you have any questions. Okay.
Right there. Right behind you.
Hello. This is Gabriel Burgess. I have a question for Heather. What was the name of the St. Lucian organization you're talking about again?
The project.
The project, yes.
It's a green affordable housing project. It's being implemented with GGGI.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That. Yeah. That's all. That's all I want. That's all I wanted to ask him. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sylvia Jones from Corporate Concierge. We provide relocation support to the international business sector. And I agree with Andrew in that it's really important to, and thanks to the panel for clearly identifying the different sectors that we need to attend to. But the growth of our international business sector is dependent on getting the right talent here and accommodating them appropriately. What we're finding now is that the success of that sector is being hampered to such a degree by the housing crisis that companies are not able to retain their talent. They're not able to get the talent that they need here in order to grow. And so we are now losing those jobs out of Bermuda to other jurisdictions, and those companies are looking at elsewhere to domicile because we cannot accommodate them in a very literal sense. So I think it's affecting every single aspect of our island community, and I think that we need to work collectively and together urgently, and that sense of urgency cannot be underemphasized. That we're seeing families turning away from Bermuda because they can't find a house to live in. And these are key employees that the BMA mandates these companies to have here. So if the company can't have the person, the company can't be here. If we can't house those people, we're losing that company. So we really need to get our act together very quickly in order to maintain the sustainability of our economy, which relies so heavily on the international business sector.
I absolutely agree. Ensuring that every Bermudian has a home and employment is going to mean that the community as a whole is thriving. That improves our reputation internationally, and it improves the quality of life for everyone in Bermuda. But we need to make sure that each one of these subpopulations are being supported and housed at the same rate in order to ensure that we are getting a maximum return on investment.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the key reasons for the change in Bermudiana, if I dare to bring it up, from the hotel to a residence, because after the EY report, it was basically very clear to the government that that need for housing within all sectors was very, very high. So that's why the Bermudiana was turned from the hotel into the residential, the 94 units filling up there. That was a positive thing, but also we have to look at also, you can't look at government all the time, and that you have some very large international insurance companies on this island, and maybe there's a cooperative that can be done between them and the government in a PPP project, where we look at places like Morgan's Point and other areas on the island, where we can look for residential housing for both the expat and locals as a cooperation project between the two.
And just to piggyback on Sylvie, you know, some individuals have managed to find housing, but not managed to secure the appropriate schooling for, you know, for the talent. So again, these are conversations that are important. You know, it's that puzzle piece, you know, working it all together. But yeah, totally agree with you. Thank you for raising
Short on
that.
time, any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Good afternoon. My name is Jamila Lodge with the BDC. I just have a question about the subsidized housing or the affordable housing. You said you have some residents who have been there for a very long time, and they have jet skis and boats and all that good stuff. In cases like that, where you've determined that their income has changed and now they can afford more, do you charge them more for living in the same space? And if not, is that an option? And then you can take those funds that you receive from the increased rent and try and build other properties or reallocate them elsewhere.
So I'll jump in on that a little bit. Again, I'll reiterate that BHC has a different mandate, and they fall under different legislation than what, say, BLMC does. Basically, we are the same as a private householder, someone that owns a house. So in that instance, the Landlord-Tenant Act protects the tenant because I've let them in. I can't go back to them and say, hey, you know, I'm going to increase the rent because I think that you got a nice boat outside your yard. I'd be on the front page of the paper again next week. So that's why I said I think that there needs to be, the housing issues need to be segmented into, is this a government? Is this a private? Is it medium income? Is it, instead of just saying affordable, because affordable could be for everyone in that whole entire area. So I'm saying that the data that needs to be created and supported, it has to be, okay, how many low income or subsidized, how many 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and that's going to take some time to create all of that. But you know, we initially have to just say, this is what we're going to do here, this is what we're going to do there, and make a stab at it in order to get it going. But I think longer term, there needs to be a plan where legislatively things are re-looked at, everything from government housing to Landlord-Tenant Act to the rent control and how they operate and who they protect and how the landlord doesn't get any benefits. Everything really and truly needs to be re-looked at. It's been there a very, very long time, and we're in a different era.
All right, thank you. I know we're short for time, so one more question. Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I got a question. Yeah, so I hear people talking about, there's two lines that get drawn. We're talking about the foreigner, and then we're talking about locals. So who's responsible for dealing with one of the core issues is disparity? And how does that play into who are we building for and how sustainable that's going to be to maintain, right, and relinquish a lot of the disparity? How, because that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the difference. I'm hearing the two lines. We're building for foreigners. Who are we building for? Okay, we got to build for locals. Like you're saying, it's one type of building going on. But there's this thing called disparity. And that is where a lot of this problem is lying. Anybody want to address that?
Your question was who's responsible, correct? Yeah. We're all responsible at the end of the day. I mean, our government does not have enough resources to do it alone. So I think that's an important factor to remember, that we are all going to have to collaborate when it comes to what is the solution, because you talk about local versus foreigner, and at this point, I think the answer really is to create structures that can be universally used, so to speak. You want a property that can be manipulated and changed and modified for who is living in it, or a building that is operating, and that's how you get the most sustainability. You want to create a structure that is flexible. And right now, unfortunately, we have a lot of beautiful historical buildings, but there are limited, and I want to say, go back to Andrew's point about the, how we need to repurpose, but we can't do that if our policies are outdated and speak to, the fact that we can't touch them because they're historical buildings and things like that. We have a lot of property on island that's derelict that needs to be changed, and I think it's our job as a community to go back to our government to state that we are willing to accept change, and to push them to also make these policy changes and different efforts that need to be done. It's a collective effort.
So you're saying all, meaning the people who don't have means and economic means are also responsible?
Yeah. I think when
how does that make sense?
To argue, to advocate, correct. Advocate for yourselves. I mean, I tell my clients all the time that I need to know what your needs are first. So you have to be willing to have the conversation with me in order for me to find the resources for you. And while some are, less responsive than others, at the end of the day, we can only build if we know what we're building for and who we're building for. So it is a partial responsibility of the community to state outwardly what they need. And I think our forefathers were a lot better at speaking up, and we're getting there again, but for a time, I don't know if there was a lot of self-advocating going on, and so we have to be able to do that again.
All right, thank you very much.